This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Berges.
Welcome back, y'all. Ashley Berges here today, and today we're going to be talking about ending the toxic cycle. I asked a question on the YouTube community here on Ashley Berges' channel, and I said, hey, what do y'all want to talk about? You know, and I brought up narcissistic abuse, overcoming narcissistic abuse, recognizing gaslighting, or ending the toxic cycle. And it looks like overcoming narcissistic abuse got 21%, recognizing gaslighting got 20%, and ending the toxic cycle got 59%. And I think we had maybe almost 700 votes. I'm not really sure. So I need to go back and check on that. I don't have it right in front of me. So I think we're going to go with the 59% on this one, ending the toxic cycles. By the way, if you asked a question on that page and I haven't answered it, I will be answering those throughout the week. There's been a lot going on this week and working with a lot of clients, which is great, and having a lot of breakthroughs, but at the same time, it hasn't given me a lot of time to be able to communicate on YouTube. And so I apologize for that ahead of time, but I will get to that for sure because your questions are important. If you're watching right now on Facebook, I'm so glad you're here on Facebook. That's awesome. Tune in, get connected, and we'll be answering questions later on in the show. And so when we think about the toxic cycle, right? When we're thinking about what the toxic cycle means or why we're in a toxic cycle. I mean, because the idea of a cycle is obviously circular. It continues to keep going and going and going, you know? So it's like there's a cycle that has no end, and we keep perpetuating it and living it in different ways in our life with different situations in our life. And so basically there's a lot of things that we can do to not change the toxic cycle, to overlook the toxic cycle, to act as though it doesn't exist, to distract ourselves, and the list goes on. So there's a lot of things that we can do that are not proactive in helping us, right? So a lot of us, use the distractions of other people. A lot of us look at relationships and say, wow, my spouse or my girlfriend or boyfriend is they have so many issues, or they're dealing with cluster B personality disorder or whatever, and we can get really into that helping, savior complex, trying to do things different, trying to show them love when they weren't loved. And there's a lot of things that we do in these cycles. Being codependent in the relationship, continuing that codependency. Finding folks where we continue a trauma bond. There's a lot of things that we have going on, and there's a lot of things that we have to realize, especially when it comes to ending the toxic cycle. Man, my nose itches. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about, first off, in order to begin to even facilitate an end to the toxic cycle, we have to look back at the origins of how this all began. Okay, so we have to kind of look back at the origins of how it all began. We have to understand the origins and what is the origin of any toxic cycle, for the most part. The family dynamic. Okay, so the family dynamic, the way you were raised, is the origin, usually, of the toxic cycle. Okay, I'm not blaming everything on mom and dad. I'm not going to do that for you. That's for you to determine. But when we blame somebody for something, we don't learn, right? We can sit there and find the fault, and we can agree that this might have been a horrible upbringing. Some of you might have been through abuse, neglect, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. So I am not taking this lightly, okay? In no way, shape, and form. But in order to rectify that and to understand and how to deal with this and how to end this toxic cycle, we have to see the situation for what it was. Okay, and for some of you that can be very scary, for some of you that can be very overwhelming, but we have to take a chance on understanding this. And so when we look at the family dynamic, we look at who we were raised by, right? If you were raised by your mother or father, if you were raised by an aunt and uncle, if you were raised, if you went through the foster care system, if you were raised by grandmother or grandmother, if you were grandmother or grandfather, if you were raised by mom or dad or just mom. And so we need to look at this type of situation and understand the situation between the people that raised you and yourself. And so let's start going back toward that. And I know this can be a bit overwhelming for folks. I get it. It's not something that's easy. And I know that some people make jokes and make light of it. It's all about your family. It all goes back to your upbringing, but it's true. I mean, because think about it. As a child, we are innocent. As a child, we are beautiful beings of light. As a child, we have done nothing wrong. As a child, we come into this world and we meet what our parents are, and they're like standing over you. For most of us, unfortunately, we're born in a hospital with these bright, horrible lighting fixtures. It's an overwhelming experience. You're being pulled out of someone, or a C-section, what have you, being pulled out of someone, and you have people all staring at you. It's a very overwhelming situation, and you go back and you live with these people. Okay? And these people that you live with are like giants. You're like this tiny baby and they're giants. And so you're like looking at them to save you. You're looking at them to be there for you. You're looking at them to reassure you. You're looking at them to give you what you need, the support and love that you need, because it's scary. You just got born. It's a really, you don't know what's going on. So what happens though with many people is that the people that raise them, for whatever reason, whether it's the fact that they were raised in an unhealthy dynamic themselves, whether they were raised in a toxic dynamic themselves, whether they were raised by parents that weren't there, maybe they were raised by parents who were neglectful, maybe they were raised by parents who were more narcissistic, right? And so whatever they learned from their upbringing brings in to your upbringing. Do you see what I'm saying? So if mom and dad were raised by some phenomenal parents and they really understood, and they're not going to be perfect, but they understood, right from wrong, and they understand what they're doing wrong, and they change it, and they actually are able to take responsibility for their actions, and they do it, and they don't want to hurt you, and they try to listen to you. I mean, that's a great scenario to be in, where they're there for you, they provide food and shelter, they give you hugs, they tell you they love you, and they really do. That's a situation that many people might not have found themselves in, okay? A lot of folks on the other end of the stick there. And so in that dynamic, so example, if dad was an alcoholic, right? If mom was dealing with depression, acute depression all the time, okay? If mom was neglectful, if mom was out at the club all the time trying to find another man, okay? There's all these different things that go in the family dynamic. And so we have to look at that. And so when I return, I'm going to be talking more about the family dynamic, because just the family dynamic alone in this part of this live feed could take us months. I could go live for months as long as I had food, water, and I could change my clothes occasionally, and Rodrigo would be able to sleep occasionally in between. We could do this for months talking about this. But we're going to try to talk about it in just a few. We're not going to have months right now, but we're going to definitely reflect on this again, because this is vitally important. It's the basis for our reality. Remember, we looked up to these people to take care of us. We looked up to these people to give us what we need. And if we didn't get what we need, or we got something different, well, guess what? We didn't get a manual to tell us that something was wrong. We didn't get a manual that told us, well, mom was a narcissist. We didn't get a manual to tell us that dad was an alcoholic, and that's not the right thing. It's not like they put 9 different parents in front of you on a game show and said, hey, which one do you want? This one's healthy, it comes from this. This one's codependent. This one's narcissistic. We didn't know that. All we knew is that our reality was this family dynamic. And we didn't know that anybody was ever different, and we felt like everybody was the same and everybody had the same type of parents. I mean, think about it. Did you ever think that other people were different? Okay, so we grew up thinking this is the norm. This is the way of life, and this is the only option I got. So stay tuned. We'll be talking more about that. We'll be talking more about the learned realities that we have, as well as our beliefs. So stay tuned. Me, Ashley Berges, will be back this time. I'll be back this time because I take this from my radio show, right? Because I say this at the end of my radio shows, my end of my segments on the show on Live Your True Life Perspectives. Ashley Berges will be back this time in 2 shakes.
Hi, my name is Reginald Harvey, and I'm a wellness champion. I just published the medical memoir Anatomy of a Patient to inspire those affected directly or indirectly by a life-threatening diagnosis. Do you know or have a family member or dear friend who is suffering from catastrophic illness or debilitating disability. This is a conversation that few people are willing to have, and I want to have it with you. You can hear me on Live Your True Life Perspectives with Ashley Berges. For more information, go to reggieharvey.net.
You can't miss the newest show, The Artist Perspective, sponsored by Art for Your Cause. To learn more about Art for Your Cause, go to artforyourcause.com. Art for Your Cause helps artists and charities by bringing artists and their work and charities together to be able to raise money for your favorite charities while still paying the artists for their work. To learn more about The Artist Perspective, go to theartistperspective.tv and watch our first episode featuring world-renowned photographer Jeremy Locke.
Welcome back live, guys. It's Ashley Berges here, live on our live stream right here. If you're watching on YouTube, awesome, amazing. If you're watching on Facebook, just as amazing. It's really great because we're talking about content about ending the toxic cycle. I asked a question of the community on YouTube to decide what they wanted to do. Was it overcoming narcissistic abuse, recognizing gaslighting, or ending the toxic cycle? And 59% decided to end the toxic cycle. We will continue to do these polls because this is the first one we've ever done, because I want to know more about what you feel and what you think. I will also be answering those questions that you asked in the community page as well as soon as I possibly can. And I try to comment on anybody's comment and question as much as possible. So I don't always have all the time to do it, but I like to do it myself. And so the comments that I respond and my responses are all from me. So I want you to know that. And so I can get to as many as possible, but I want to always make sure that I answer responsibly, and I want to make sure that I have the time to answer responsibly. Okay, so we're talking about the ending the toxic cycle. Right before the break, I was talking about the family dynamics, right? About how the family dynamics directly reflect on this cycle that we have, because what we learn growing up, the dynamic that we're in, the family that we're in, the upbringing that we have, the dynamic we have with mother and father, the dynamic we have with integrating with mother. You know, was that a simple thing? Was that a hard thing? Was it hard to figure out what she was going to feel like one day? Was her mood constantly swinging up and down? Do we not know really where we were going to fit in? Was there questions as to where we're going to get taken care of? Was there questions as to where we're going to get food and shelter? What was going on through our mind? Because remember, when we're children, we're mostly trying to we're trying to be taken care of. We're doing whatever we can. Some of us were jumping through massive amount of hoops back when we were younger, because we realized that, okay, we're dealing with the situation. I don't really understand it, but I know that if I don't do this or I don't do that, this isn't going to happen, because last time it didn't happen. I really don't know how to deal with it. And I jumped through hoops growing up too, and I understand that, and the fact that you just didn't know where somebody stood. And you tried one thing, and if that didn't work, you tried something else, and if that didn't work, you tried something else, and if that didn't work, and then you try to figure out a pattern to it, right? You try to figure out that pattern, and then over time, you don't realize that you are constantly living that way. And so when you go into different relationships as you get older, you're used to having to work so hard to connect with somebody that you find that very normal. Okay, many of you have a parent that was dealing with a cluster B personality disorder. Perhaps you were raised by a narcissist. And you don't know, when you're a kid, you don't know. They don't give you a diagram and they say, hey, this person's, they do like a heat sensing chart and they show you, yep, narcissist, yep, this person says. They don't tell you that. You don't know that. We have no idea. So we live our life trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure out how to just deal with it. We're trying to figure out how to get the love from our parents. We're trying to figure out why we're not good enough. Because usually what happens is you start wondering, you're like, why am I not getting love? And you see your friends with their parents and they look so happy or what have you. And then you're like, what is wrong with me? I must be a bad kid to not get the love and support from my parents. Or I must be a bad kid to not get fed. Or I must be a bad kid to be left at home for 12 hours at a time when mom gets home at 4 a.m. from the club. Or dad from the club. I'm not saying it's all about mom in the club. Okay, so what I'm saying is that, over time, we lived through that, and many of you left after 18 years. Some of you stayed longer. Some of you stayed less time at home. It seems like the more painful the experience was, the less time you spent. You know, I've had clients that moved out at 15, 16 years old. I've had clients that have lived in garages. I've had clients that have lived on the streets to get away from the family dynamic. And so depending on what that is, and depending on the structure of that dynamic, we follow suit as the cycle, you know, as the cycle is, we continue the cycle, and we find someone else that has those same similar features. And what I mean by that is, like, some of us that have come from a narcissistic family dynamic, it's very second nature and normal to seem to bring all these types of same people towards you, that same type of energy. Many of you might even, when people say they're dating their mother or father, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is just like your mother, and people try to avoid that if they don't like their parent or what have you, but you see what I'm saying? Like, that gets very scary, because what happens is we're taking that cycle and we're bringing it in, and we're not taking care of the work that we have to do to understand how to shed that cycle, but better yet, how to understand how it began. Okay, so that's the clear thing, and that's the clear, interesting story, is learning how that became our reality. Okay, how did that become our reality? How did we begin? And a lot of this is very philosophical in nature, as well as psychological in nature, because this is something that most people don't talk about, because we want to have like the fast, quick fix, right? We want to sit there and say, well, you know, all this is to blame from the second to last relationship I was in. I haven't been myself because of that second to last relationship or that last relationship. And all of this is predicated on XYZ, when all of this is really predicated on the beginning. I mean, what we learned growing up, like, I remember watching my family dynamic. I remember watching my mom and my dad and how they interacted. Right? And how that dynamic, how, you know, one person would get their way and the other person would kind of cower down, and one person would always be in charge, and the other person was very codependent. And you look at that dynamic, and when I was going into my first real relationship, it was kind of neutral, I think. But then right after that, I jumped into like the frying pan, I would consider, because I found people that were very much like that dynamic. It was like my father, and I was carrying through with this codependency because I had learned it, I'd watched it, and I'm not devaluing anybody, and I'm not being rude. I'm just saying that's the true reality, is that we were codependent. When you're codependent in a relationship, when you look back at that person, usually when they were being raised, they were in a codependent type situation. And all I'm saying is that the cycle predicates, the cycle continues, right? And when we see our parents' dynamic like that, good, bad, and different, healthy, unhealthy, somewhere in the middle, we find we're able to carry that out in our own life again into another relationship and another relationship and another relationship. And when we have multiple failed relationships, or we find ourselves extremely unhappy, we've got to look at the reality and say, hey, how did I get here? What was the reasoning for me getting here? How did this happen? How did I find a relationship like this? How have I found multiple relationships that have similarities? Now, I know that some of you say, well, no, I haven't been dating the same similar person. This person's very different because of this or that. But I'm talking about not looks. I'm not talking about career. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about down at the core of the individual. Are you kind of bringing to you that same energy? And can you see the direction between that person, the previous person, and the dynamic that you had growing up? Because I sure can, and I had to work on it. I took a year off, and I've talked about this. I've written 2 books, and before I wrote my first book, I had no room to write my first book. This was over 20 years ago because I hadn't done the work, and I literally took a year off from dating and sex, and I had given back that last engagement ring, and I realized that there was something wrong with that relationship. But I realized, he was so, God bless, but there was so many issues with him that it was hard to see my issues. And a lot of times in these relationships, we see other people's issues, but we don't see our own, right? And so I saw his issues, and I knew that I needed to get out of the relationship because I wasn't happy, it wasn't working, and I just didn't see that being a future. But at the same time, when I got out of it, I remember getting real with myself. And I gave back the ring, and I moved out, and then I got real with myself because I realized it wasn't just him that was the problem. And I'm not saying we're a problem. I'm just saying it wasn't just him. I had to make changes in my life, and I had to understand what brought me into that relationship. What encouraged me in the very beginning when I met this person to actually carry on a relationship, to start a relationship, to move in, to play house, and to do all this stuff, when in reality, now that I look back at it, I mean, within the first few minutes, I mean, what was I doing? But it was so ingrained in me, and that personality was so ingrained in me, and that codependency was so ingrained in me that I went through and took through the cycle. And it was interesting to step back and realize, okay, it takes two to tangle, right? It takes two to tangle, and it takes two to tango. So we have to think about the fact that, okay, we're all tangled up in this, but what part do I play and what part do they play? And I know that it's easier to look at their part. It's easier to look at their part. It's easier to read books about their part. It's easier to sit there and say, this person did X, Y, Z, this person's this and that. And it's good to understand, to get closure and to really understand what you're dealing with, to understand the cycle. But then the next part is to understand us. It's to understand, what have we done? What do we need to change? And where did this behavior come from? Why am I putting myself in situations that unfortunately are not at my highest good? What is about that? Why do I have that low self-esteem? Because most of it all goes back to that. And many of us that are dealing with codependency, that is watching this live stream right now, knows that there's probably been a cycle. And the cycle has been, when you start really looking at the characters in the cycle, you're starting to see what? You're starting to see some continuity. You're starting to see some similarities. So we'll talk more about that when we return. We talk more about that, about learned realities as well as beliefs. So I stay tuned. Ashley Berges will be back here in 2 shakes.
Hey there, friends. I'm glad you're catching the live broadcast of Live Your True Life Perspectives. I've created my very own Patreon page. You can go to Patreon and you can check out my page. The link is right here. It's an amazing platform because I'm able to offer more stuff there, different stuff, than I am on the Live Your True Life program, as well as on my YouTube channel. You've probably seen my YouTube channel. We put up new video content every week, and we have a lot of great content on there. But on the Patreon page, I'm able to go a step further. I'm offering group coaching sessions, private coaching sessions, as well as access to exclusive content, like the Celebrity Perspective Season 1. I won a Telly Award for that this year. You can watch all episodes right here on Patreon. I'm offering you the exclusive chance to come on the radio with me, to be live on Live Your True Life Perspectives, nationally syndicated radio show, to talk about yourself, to talk about your amazing life, and to inspire the Live Your True Life listeners. When you become a member of my Patreon page, you are directly supporting me to help other people to live their true life. I look forward to seeing you on Patreon. Let's inspire one another. Are you currently in a toxic relationship and unsure what the next day will bring? Have you often wondered if there's more to life than this? Do you suffer from self-esteem issues that you've had since you were a young child? Have issues or have difficulty speaking with your family? Do you feel surrounded by self-centered people? Seems as though you're always giving and they're always taking. If you've answered yes to any of these questions, you need some answers. The 10-day challenge to live your true life gives you the knowledge and techniques for creating boundaries in your life that help us to deal with family, as well as dealing with those narcissistic and toxic people in your life. It offers the insight into understanding and overcoming your self-esteem issues, and to begin to see for the first time your amazing value. You owe it to yourself to find the power within you.
Hey there, friends. Ashley Berges back, and we've been talking today about ending the toxic cycle and beginning with the family dynamics, how it started, how the toxic cycle started, the learned realities, and our beliefs. And I find it interesting because many of you are in relationships right now, and I've been there as well, where I've been in a relationship with somebody that I wanted to save, I wanted to help, I wanted to be their savior. I wanted to repair everything that had gone wrong in their life, and I hope that I could be that person to do that, and it's just not feasible. We can't ever take the role of somebody else. I mean, first off, that's a boundary issue. But second of all, we can't do that. We can't facilitate love that they didn't get from somebody and try to give that love in the place of that. We have to realize that we are nobody's savior. We can't change them. And that we have to look and say to ourselves, has this been a pattern in our life? I mean, many of you have been a savior to your mother or your father. You were raised that way, and you felt like the only way that you derived value was based on you doing that. That your value was directly reflected on the fact that you helped somebody, or that you saved somebody, or you were there for them. And many of us have that dynamic still with our parents. So many of you might still be the savior to mom. Or, think about it. Think about those dynamics that we have. Maybe you were the one that mom was always talking to and telling you everything, and she didn't have any boundaries with you, and you were more like the friend than the kid. Maybe you were always dealing with bailing dad out, dealing with that type of dynamic where he was constantly getting into trouble, various things, and there you were. And so you're used to that type of dynamic. You're used to bailing people out, helping people, saving people. And it's not a bad thing to help somebody. But I really want you to think about the fact that other people themselves need to be able to save themselves. We can't take that away from someone. It's their God-given right to save themselves. It's their God-given right to figure out their own reality and to understand who they are. We can't impart that knowledge into them and make them see a certain way. And some of us are in relationships now where we are literally blue in the face trying to explain ourselves. Many of you out there are in this trap that you've fallen into where you're in a relationship where the other person does not accept what you say, does not believe in you, does not trust you, and you're constantly trying to explain to them how you're not cheating, and you're not this, and you're not a bad person, you're doing this, and so you're constantly explaining, but that codependency of trying to explain and also the need to be reassured and the need for validation, because many of us were raised in family dynamics that we were told, now think about this, we were told, or not necessarily told, but we were told by actions, by their actions, that our validation was only predicated on what we did for other people. Okay? I would have to say 98% of everybody that's watching this and that will watch this and that will watch this for 20 years to come, maybe 2%, was told by their parents that their value, that our value is derived from within. Maybe not 2%, maybe 0.5%, maybe 0.1%. That our value is derived from within. The reason why they didn't tell you that is because they didn't know it. They believe that validation and us being valuable and us being validated was derived on what we did for other people. Because they did it too. And their parents did it too. And their parents did it too. They didn't have the knowledge to impart that, to say it's about you doing right for you. And obviously when we find unconditional love for ourselves, we can unconditionally love other people. But if we're just walking through the motions here, connecting this dot and going through the cycles, we're also teaching those cycles to our children as well. And I really want you to think about that because those learned realities of ours, the learned reality that I need to prove my value, the learned reality that I need to prove my innocence, the learned reality that I should stay in this relationship no matter how toxic it is because I need this person to love me, I need to save it, I need to have this relationship work. If this relationship doesn't work, then it shows you that I'm not good enough, I'm not valuable enough. It puts the chinks in the armor. And I think that's something that we really need to think about. And I'm not over here today going to have, a lot of I can't go from ending the cycle from the predication of the family dynamic to the solution. But what I'm doing right now is I'm showing you how to get to solution by identifying the family dynamic and identifying what you learned. Your learned realities from that dynamic. Like I told you before, and I've said it on video, and I'm going to say it again, I'm going to say it a million times. The reason why I titled my book, The 10-Day Challenge to Live Your True Life, and the previous book, To Live Your True Life, is because living your best life is using the learned realities. Living your true life is saying, okay, here's my learned realities. Because this is the way that I was raised, good, bad, or indifferent. But I'm going to make those changes because this is no longer holding water. This is no longer true because I've realized that the dynamic was not healthy. Or I realized that I was living in a codependent dynamic, codependent mother and a narcissistic father, or a codependent mother and a borderline father, or a borderline mother and a so you see what I'm saying? It wasn't a healthy dynamic. It was a dynamic based on upbringing, a dynamic based on past experiences. And when we try to understand that, we're taking everything at face value and not understanding that we're having to try to jump through hoops to try to get the love, the admiration, the care, just the attention. And so many of us are still trying to get that, but now we're older and we're in a marriage or we're in a relationship where it's kind of the same dynamic again, and we're either dealing with gaslighting, or we're dealing with toxic relationships, or we're dealing with somebody that we are codependent with, and we haven't really found our identity. Because one caveat is that once we do get healthy and we do have our identity and it is solid and we're not allowing somebody to walk all over our boundaries, aka our values and beliefs, all of a sudden we see the dynamic very clearly. And we make choices based on that because we no longer want to live in an unhealthy environment. Because a healthy person is not going to choose somebody that's unhealthy, that's not working on themselves, that's not taking responsibility for their life. A healthy person that understands who they are and has unconditional love for themselves and is not looking for validation outside of themselves is not going to pick someone that's unhealthy. It's just not the right thing. It's not going to happen. Why? Because you see through the situation, right? So you stop being the savior, saying, well, this person has gone through a checkered past, or this person has gone through a really emotional background, and I want to save them because of X, Y, Z, or I want to be there for them, or I want to coddle them, or I feel so bad about this stuff, and I feel like I can't leave, or whatever that looks like, or if the tables are turned. But think about that. This is how we get into those cycles, and our belief system directly reflects that as well. So the beliefs that we have beliefs around our upbringing. The beliefs around our upbringing keeps us in the cycle. And we can talk more about that on another live stream, because I know that we only have a little bit more time left to do some Q&A here at the end, and we'll come back and do Q&A. But the beliefs that we created in the family dynamic about how life is supposed to be and how we're supposed to live our life directly reflects on how we live our life, right? It's about who we choose. It's about the people we choose. It's about the dynamic we choose. It's about what we believe that we're worthy of, or what we're not believe, or what we don't believe that we're worthy of, right? It all comes down to us. So when we return, we're doing some Q&A, and hopefully I'll be answering a few questions for sure. We'll definitely get to, I would say, at least 4 or 5 questions tonight. And then I look forward to answering those questions when we return. So stay tuned. If you haven't already put out a question, ask us. We won't have a huge amount of time tonight just because I have some sessions right after this, but I just wanted to make sure that we got the live show in. Remember, we'll be back next week as well. So stay tuned. Let's do the Q&A just after this. And me, Ashley Berges, will be back this time. 2 shakes.
Is there something impacting your relationship? Even though the years when your kids are small is a beautiful time of life filled with magical moments, it can also be a time when couples struggle to stay connected. After all, your kids need a lot of your time, but so does your business or your career. And making time for self-care is hard, so your health and well-being suffers. And date night? Well, that seems like a distant dream. So instead of days filled with love and connection, there are moments of tension, stress, and worry. But what if there was help to get you through these years? A solution built with young parents in mind. One with no difficult concepts to master. One that's fun and gives immediate results. And fits seamlessly into your schedule no matter how busy you get. a solution to make sure you stay connected. We're offering you support to keep your connection strong. The Connection app for couples. Click the link below to learn more. We're making together better so your moments stay magical.
How do you connect with yourself every day? How do you sit there and go, okay, I'm playing this role today, or I'm doing this, but how do I really stay Will? How do I stay centered?
Yeah. Funny you say like playing characters. I think the key to finding a character is to understand who you are within the character.
Good.
So you're kind of forced to connect with yourself when you explore a character. You're like, well, what is it about me that exists? What is it about the character that exists in me? So when you travel that line, you have to introduce yourself to those aspects, whatever they may be, whether it's like the crazed lunatic or whether it's, the doting lover or whatever. Like, how do you find that within yourself? And so you constantly reconnect. I think acting is a real exercise in reconnecting with oneself.
Hey there, guys. Ashley Berges back, and now let's do some Q&A. We've been talking about ending the toxic cycles, and the interesting about toxic cycles is that the toxic cycles all of it impacts you. So if you're married to someone that has a tumultuous family dynamic, and they're bringing it into the relationship, it's going to affect you. Okay. So our first question is Caesar. Caesar asked, what was it?
What do you do when your wife thinks that she doesn't have a problem, but in reality she is driving the whole family crazy?
Okay. What happens when your wife's driving the whole family crazy? She doesn't know she has a problem. She comes from a really toxic family dynamic. Okay, and there's a little bit of backstory on there about how the father would get enraged coming home and would demand the wife to make him dinner at all ends of the night, all hours of the night, and then if he didn't like the food, then he would just break the plates on the ground, what have you, and demand to have dinner cooked again. Okay, so you get the idea. His wife came from a toxic family dynamic environment where the father sounds quite emotionally abusive, definitely through things. Don't know if he physically hurt people, but we don't know that. It's not in the question. What do you do? Well, Caesar, one of the biggest things is that in order for somebody to get help, they have to know that they need help. And if you've been trying to explain that to her or have that conversation, kudos to you. You need to keep continuing to have that conversation. But if you've had the conversation and you've talked about it and you've explained, hey, honey, we all care about you and we love you, but what you went through as a kid, you need to deal with. Okay, this is not just swept under the rug, right? This is some real traumatic stuff. And so if you can have that conversation or have multiple conversations where you can get her to try to get some help, she's going to need some help. And if it's causing problems in the family, it needs to happen sooner than later. And I've found that we can try to lead somebody to water, and we hope we can. Hopefully you can lead the horse to water. You don't know. But one of the things that you want to really think about is bringing up that conversation, having that conversation with her, not being judgmental, but explaining, maybe the dynamic between the family and how she was raised. And I think that's a big thing, and knowing where you can get some help and who you can work with. I see clients all over the country. I could definitely help, but I think you need to get her some help, and she's got to be willing to get that help. It can't be you forcing it. It's just like anything. If somebody's doing drugs and the family wants them to go to rehab, but the person that's doing drugs doesn't want to go to rehab, them going to rehab isn't going to help. Okay, that's why rehabs work a very low percentage. I'm not going to say the percent right now, but the percentage is very, very low. In some situations, single digits, because if somebody doesn't want to go, they're not going to stop. They're going to come back out and they're going to do it again. So what I'm saying is she's got to be on the bandwagon. She's got to be accepting, and she's also got to acknowledge the fact that she's dealing with stuff. And if that's not the case, and you work through this and you give it the good try, and you work on this for this next month, and you really focus on this and try to get her to really to have those conversations and to open her up and to have these conversations, if she's not willing to budge at that point in time, you need to decide what's best for the family. Okay? And sometimes when we placate people and when we're in relationships and we're codependent, we don't allow them to get the help they need because they need to hit a certain spot to get that help. Sometimes we have to accelerate that. Sometimes we have to allow people to hit that spot and to determine if they're ready to get help. And so there might be a time that there might need to be a separation, but right now I would try as much as I could to try to have those conversations, to try to have positive conversations, to try to explain the past, maybe to introduce her to some videos that could help her, but also just being there supportive and explaining you're supportive and not judging, but saying that this does need to get rectified. I think if it's affecting you and your kids, you've got to really do something, because remember, the kids are part of the family dynamic. What they see in the household will affect them as well. So definitely important. I hope that this has helped you, Caesar, and I look forward to hearing you on progress and hear if anything's changed through the conversations, and if it hasn't, what you're planning to do next.
Okay, we have another question from Zen and me. Question is, I set a boundary finally with my sister. Now I get the silent treatment going on 2 months. What do I do about that? Please explain what the silent treatment purpose is. Why would someone do this to you?
Okay, so Zenami has asked the question that, well, she's posed the comment that she actually put a boundary down for her sister. That she put a boundary down finally. That's good. Good for you. Good work. And the sister has given her the silent treatment for how long?
2 months.
2 months. Okay, so the sister has given her the silent treatment for 2 months after placing a boundary with her sister. Okay, first off, good job on the boundary. Second, obviously this is a new thing for you, because obviously this has affected her quite a bit. The silent treatment is used as manipulation and control. Zen and me, it is total manipulation and control, and it is used to try to get you to back down. It is used to try to get you to apologize. It is used to try to get you to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean that. Okay? So this is a tactic holding out to get you to cave. And so what I'm saying to you is this: don't. If you give into this, you let her walk over your boundary. You basically just said, what I did before is not real and it doesn't matter. And so you can say, see what I'm saying? It's like, if I put a boundary down, you and I are hanging out, and there's something that happens and it goes against my values and beliefs, and I don't accept that, and you give me the silent treatment for 2 months. But see, we have to be okay with not speaking. You have to be okay with not hearing from her. It's okay. And I know it sucks because it's your sister, but at the same time, if you are to back down, if I was to call you and go, oh, hey, it's not a big deal, that basically null and voided what I say, and then the respect level will go as well. So I would much rather be respected than placate somebody. And so one thing you've done right, the boundary. 2, the second thing you've done right is staying true to the boundary. The third thing that you want to realize is that, silent treatment is manipulation and control. It is used to control the other person, and it is actually a form of abuse. So she is abusing you, even though she's not physically touching you. The silent treatment abuse is worse than almost anything. Most people would rather get yelled at, screamed at, even possibly some people talk about wanting to get hit over the silent treatment. I don't agree with that, but again, People hate the silent treatment. That's why it's so good. And then last but not least, remember, if you are to give in, the only response that can come from this is her to call you and apologize, her to open the line of communication, and there needs to be an apology there, and there needs to be some sort of agreement of responsibility. If you do that, you null and void your boundary. And I know that it sucks that it's your sister, but you got to stay true to yourself. And this might be hard, but what you'll learn from this is the fact that she's either ingrained to use the silent treatment, or she's full-on manipulating you, or she's learned this from being around it. But either way, don't back down. Just go on with your life and try to do what you can, and really try to focus on you and really start working on yourself, because she has some work that she needs to do. I hope that's helped you.
Okay, the next question is from Life is a Journey, Let It Go. She also donated $10.
Thank you, by the way. Life is a journey. Let it go. I appreciate you. Thank you.
The question is, can a codependent turn into a narc or become BPD from abusive relationship?
Can a codependent turn into a narc or get BPD from an abusive relationship? Okay. That's a really great question. Obviously, when we think about cluster B personality disorders, I believe that it's either genetic, it's kind of brought down from, mom, dad, or it's a learned environmental response or protection, right? It's a way of protecting ourselves. And I'll give you a good example that I find very interesting. Now, I don't know as far as, I don't know a lot on this particular, so I have a client where when she was growing up, she has a brother, and her brother was adopted, and then she was not adopted. She was actually their child. And growing up, she was treated really well because she jumped through all the hoops, right? She would jump through all the hoops of, she actually a borderline mother with narcissistic tendencies. And so she would jump through all the hoops, even though the mother would give her silent treatment and stuff like that. She'd try to figure out how to get in there. Her brother didn't do any of that stuff, and he got all the abuse and the neglect in the relationship. The mother would hit him and yell at him and physically take out her anger on the brother. And you see that a lot nowadays, not nowadays, but all the time, probably since the beginning of time, where you have the brother and sister, or the two sisters or the two brothers, where the mother picks the favorite and then treats the other one really horribly. Now, he ended up turning out to be somewhat of a narcissist. Now, I don't know, he was adopted, so we can't go back lineage-wise to understand what was going on with the mother. But I wonder if it was a protection. Do you get to that point where you have to feel inflated better about yourself because you don't have that identity? You don't have an identity. When you were growing up, you were being made fun of and laughed at, and all the things that you shouldn't be by a mother. And so I think that there's a protection there when it comes to narcissism sometimes, with the inability to want to see the situation because it was so horrifying. What would have really happened to him if he hadn't had that, because he wasn't able to work on himself because he didn't have the knowledge to understand that. So I guess what I'm getting to is that I think that a codependent who has been abused in relationships can get very angry. I think they can also take on different characteristics of the relationship. So, for example, if the codependent had previously been in a relationship with somebody that had BPD, they might actually feel like they are at one point in time struggling with BPD because they begin to lose themselves in the relationship. They begin to find themselves identifying with that person, no matter how bad that person treats them. Because the codependent doesn't have the identity. And so when we don't have an identity, and we haven't found our identity, it's not a horrible thing. It's just the way that most people are. I mean, it's probably 98% of the population doesn't know who they are. Because we were, like I was saying, because we were never taught. When we were growing up, our parents didn't say our value is within, and you got to find that value within, and you got to create these boundaries. You got to find your values and your morals and your beliefs, and you got to stand by those. You got to stand by those, and you got to create those boundaries, and you got to find that unconditional love, and you got to create that and facilitate that by loving yourself and finding, the great attributes about yourself and working on yourself. And that wasn't what they taught us. And so I find more often that the codependent is trying to find love, and trying to be reassured and trying to be accepted and just trying so hard when it comes to the narcissist or the borderline, just working so hard and trying to explain themselves and trying to do everything that they can possibly can to get in the good graces of that person. Anything that can possibly be done. They'll jump over every hoop, losing themselves in every single hoop, losing their identity even more. And I don't think they really had it. Because if they had their identity and they were healthy, they wouldn't have been in the relationship to begin with. And so as they walk through that and as they go through that, I believe they begin to take on some of the mannerisms because that's what they're seeing day in and day out. And I think they begin to question their own reality as well. Because again, it's the codependent that doesn't have that identity that they need, that strength of the identity. And so I think that sometimes in the next relationships, when they've left the borderline or they've left the narcissist, they can appear that way. I feel like they can appear that way because they're taking on some of the traits of the past individual. And I'm not saying that's all the time, but I do think for a lot of the time, they take on those traits. And I have a friend of mine, multiple, I can talk about my friend a little bit instead of, because I have a friend of mine that was married for a long period of time to someone that suffered with borderline personality disorder. And over that period of time, I watched him because we've been friends for 10, 12 years. And I was watching throughout the whole process. And when he was going through the divorce event, he was starting, his mannerisms had really changed. But I realized that that was a defense mechanism. I realized that the anger and the resentment and then the question of identity. And because that was his way of survival in the relationship, those were basically the layers of onion that had to be taken apart. And I thought, and now it's interesting because after years of basically personal rehabilitation and myself being a friend and other people being supportive and him going to therapy, he really realized that he had lost his identity and he had given away everything, no matter what she did next, whether it was, doing this or having sex with a drug dealer, doing the drugs or lying about this or whatever it was, he was still there trying to placate the situation. And so he had lost all of that. And so I really think that the codependent is in a spot of, it's almost a spot of denial of who they are, but it's also the inability to see clearly. And I think because of probably all the pain and suffering and the trying to explain and trying to fit in, and doing all that has really caused that person to even lose themselves even more. And so I feel like sometimes that can happen. Because I really think that in order to really be like a real narcissist or a real borderline, it has to really start at a real formative age. And I think that, that there's some scientific research to that about what age that would start at, what that looks like, environmental, how we take on those traits and how we learn that if it's not genetic. And so I don't think that an adult at that point can, but I think that they can feel that way. Just like when people are in relationships with a narcissist, they start asking, am I a narcissist, right? But I think it goes back to we haven't learned who we are. And we know that we didn't know who we are because we were trying to explain to somebody else to give us validity. And we stayed in a relationship with somebody that questioned us on every single motive. And it's interesting how in some of those relationships, the codependent never questions the other person because the other person is always questioning them. And so I think that's it. And I think it's the not knowing who they are, not knowing their values, not being able to stand up for themselves, because you can't stand up for yourself if you don't know who you are. I hope that has answered your question, because I really like that question. That's a great question. It would be great to do an entire show on that. But in that case, if you're in the other situation and you're with that person now or trying to be with that person now, that person has got to get helped to get over not only those relationships, but also there might have been some background guilt into how they got into those relationships, things that haven't been dealt with. But also I would go back to the family dynamic with that person, because usually the family dynamic that helped create and facilitate that codependency, that's something that has to be rectified to really get to that person's soul and understand who they are, and for them to be able to create themselves as a human being, knowing every facet of themselves. And I think it'd be very powerful, but they'll need some time to heal, but also they'll need time to begin to find themselves and probably find themselves for the first time. Great question. I'm going to turn the AC back on. This AC goes off and it makes us hot in here. What's the next? Thank you so much, by the way. That was a great question.
The Next question is from Fake Signals from Vega. It says, what causes someone to make up stories about people that are not true? And even when one confronts them about the story and says that it is not true, they still continue telling the same lie.
Okay, repeat that one more time. Sorry.
It says, what causes someone to make up stories about people that are not true? And even when one confronts them about the story and says it's not true, they still continue telling the same lie.
Okay, so somebody is telling a story about somebody that's not true, and when they're confronted about it, they still continue to tell the lie. Is it in a relationship, a marriage, or a friendship? Do you know?
It doesn't say.
Okay. And who asked the question?
Faint Signals from Vega.
Faint Signals from Vega. Great name, by the way. I love that. Okay, so basically somebody's telling a lie about you, and it's not true, but they keep telling it. Okay, well, if this is in a relationship and it's something that you haven't done and it's something that they're claiming you've done, they're using that to control and to manipulate, but they're also, to some degree, they must believe that you've done it, or that is part of their mantra to put you down or to judge you or to base that on judgment, i.e. you did this, so that makes you a bad person. Prove it that you didn't do it. If it's a friendship type thing, and that's not much of a friend, obviously, that they would say something to you, that they would keep telling a lie. Obviously, to me, in those situations, I feel like it's somebody that doesn't want to deal with their own stuff. I feel like it's someone that's putting stuff on you and making you try to dig out of a hole for something you didn't do. And what's happening is there must be another issue over here that they want you to avoid, to not talk about. They don't want to discuss something. So let me give you an example just so I can make myself a little more clear. I see a lot of times in relationships where one person is constantly asking the questions of the others and finds the fault in the other person. And so when the other person finally speaks up and has something to say, the other person immediately says, remember that time when you were cheating on me? Remember that time when you dated that person right before we dated? And they're like, yeah, I remember. I can't believe you slept with this person. Okay. Well, this happened before we ever dated. We weren't even together. I don't understand. And it gets brought up over and over again. Well, you lied to me previously about it. You hadn't told me the truth, whatever that looks like. So they're constantly spinning that yarn, right? Now, what happens when you're doing that is that no other real stuff that's going on in the relationship can be talked about. It's used as a buffer. It's used as something to basically keep the other person from being asked questions. So if I have things that if I'm saying that you've done all these things to me that are not true, it keeps you explaining. Okay, it keeps you in the process of explaining. As you explain, you get blue in the face explaining. By the time you're done explaining, I still don't believe you, you have no time to question me. So what I'm saying is that in this situation, I would let it go. If this is a spouse or a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you need to think about the fact that what's going over on the other side of the fence, that they're using this as a tactic to keep me explaining where I don't have anything, I don't have any ammo because I'm just trying to basically, make myself, to show my innocence. But also, if you're over explaining yourself, trying to explain your innocence, why are you doing it? The more that you do that, the more they're going to keep doing it. When you just ignore it and say, hey, I'm not even, you know what, you know the truth, this didn't happen, I'm not giving it any more of my mind share, and I'm not even going to speak about it. If you continue this, that's fine, I will leave, I will see you later. You can do it in a very positive way, right? But don't give it any energy or any power. Stop over-explaining yourself and realize that there's something on the other side that they're avoiding talking about, and they're using your indiscretions that didn't even happen. They're using that as something to get in the way of what the real argument is, or the fear that you will find out something about them. So I hope that helps, because basically when somebody's doing that and it's a lie, why do we even give it any power anyway? Unless you're married to this person, and if you are, then you want to think about that too and say, okay, I can also stop that conversation too. I don't have to have this conversation, and in a positive way, leave and come back when they've decided to de-escalate, but then proposition the fact that this never happened. I hope that helps you, because that can get a little overwhelming and really kind of sad. Perfect. That was a great question though, and I really appreciate that question, because for any of y'all that are over-explaining yourself and dealing with somebody that's saying that you're doing something that you're not doing, don't give it the mind share. Don't give it the energy. And if you're married to this situation, Okay, that's a different story, but we got there, right? We got there from the cycle. Otherwise, we wouldn't accept it. So we feel like we have to explain ourselves. We feel like we have to get them to know us. We feel like we have to get them to understand us and to accept us and to finally find the truth. When in reality, we've got to find that within ourselves and then look at that historical record to understand how we got into this pattern cycle in our life. So I hope this show has helped you. Please tune in. We'll be back next Tuesday on the live show. We had a live show last Saturday, which was great. I'm going to be unable to do the live show this Saturday, but we will be back the following Saturday. So next Tuesday and Saturday live shows. I will put up a question in the next day or two on what the subject matter is that you'd like me to talk about, and I look forward to hearing about your perspective and what you think would be the best subject matter. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this with your family and friends. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel because it makes me feel good about what I'm doing and what I'm creating, and I want to help. I want to help you, and that's why I do what I do. It's been something that I've dedicated my whole life to. Also, if you liked the video, please give us a like, and in the comment section below and throughout the chat, just let us know some of the things that are going on and some of the stuff about the toxic cycle that interests you, as well as any other subject matter that you'd like us to talk about. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your day, night, morning, and look forward to seeing you soon. And don't forget to live your true life.
Are you currently in a toxic relationship and unsure what the next day will bring? Have you often wondered if there's more to life than this? Do you suffer from self-esteem issues that you've had since you were a young child? Have issues or have difficulty speaking with your family? Do you feel surrounded by self-centered people? Seems as though you're always giving and they're always taking. If you've answered yes to any of these questions, you need some answers. The 10-day challenge to live your true life gives you the knowledge and techniques for creating boundaries in your life that help us to deal with family, as well as dealing with those narcissistic and toxic people in your life. It offers the insight into understanding and overcoming your self-esteem issues, and to begin to see for the first time your amazing value. You owe it to yourself to find the power within you.